One of the things about one-on-ones, in particularly, we're going to start with the Connect one-on-one. One thing that this amazing organizer did in Phoenix is that she asked me a lot of questions, just like Goyo did. I call it the 10-70-20 rule, or 10-70-20 practice. I always say, if in a one-on-one, I spend a lot of the time talking, that is not an effective one-on-one. So what I always say is, the 10 and the 20% are mine. The 70% is the other person. Now this is flexible, okay? I also have seen organizers that I'm coaching that put out a chronometer and actually start measuring, and I'm like, no. You gotta pay attention to the meeting, right? Like, you don't be there trying to count seconds and minutes, like that's not the point. The point is here to think, am I actually doing most of the talking or most of the listening? So in the first 10% that I always start with, it's the 10% when I'm gonna share a little bit about myself and the conversation we're going to have. So I always like to sit down and start talking about, this is what we're going to talk about today. Have you ever had a meeting where you sit down with a person and they start talking and you never know what they want? Have you ever been there where, like, say 10 minutes, 20 minutes in, you're like, where are they going? Are they going to ask me something? Right? This happens often. And I hate those meetings because I don't know where they're taking me, right? So that 10% is for the person to know what you're doing. So I usually start by saying, this is my name. This is the reason why I wanted to meet with you. This is what we're going to cover, right? And I explain those things so the person can actually have an understanding of where we're going in the conversation. The second 70% for me is the meat of the conversation, the most important piece. The 70% should be focused on asking open-ended questions. So what I always say is, that is where you learn the most about the person. We're going to practice a few of those questions, actually, and we're going to go through some of those pieces. And the final piece is the 20%, which I think is the ask and explanation. In the last part of the conversation, you try to bring the person's self-interest. You try to find their self-interest and bring it to the current work that you're doing. So like Goyo, when we sat down and he said, I want to learn more about immigrant students being in the university, what he wanted to do basically was to teach me that there were other people like me on campus who were suffering from the mistreatment of their employer. I didn't know that. But he didn't say, oh, pobrecitos workers, you know? Like, you need to learn about these workers. He didn't say that. He didn't victimize the workers. He told me, like, you come here every day. How does it feel to see your brothers and sisters in the cafeteria? He pushed me. He asked me questions. And it made me elevate my conscience. It made me also think about the fact that I was a worker just like the workers that were in my cafeteria. I was working in a catering company, and I had to work very long hours every day, and I had to come to school. So he was like, same with the workers. I work here too, have a family. And on the way, I also train and organize workers in this company. So that 20% at the end, when he made the ask, I remember very clearly he told me, you speak Spanish. There are very few students here who speak Spanish and can connect with these workers. I would love for you to come to the meeting that we're having so you can talk to the workers. I was like, yes, I felt helpful, right? I was like, yes, the one thing that I am here in this country for to learn English, they're actually asking me to speak Spanish. Yes. I went. I showed up to the meeting because I knew I had a purpose, okay? Because he knew how to tie my self-interest to the conversation. We're going to start with the relationship building, with the connect piece of the conversation. The first thing is connecting using your story. How many of you participated in Marshall Gant's training on narrative or story of self? A few of you. Oh, great. It's the follow-up of the class. One of the most powerful things that has happened in my life is to actually have these 3 words in my pocket. Challenge, choice, and outcome, which is the way that Marshall Gant says we can develop our personal narratives, our stories of self, right? I always think about what is the challenge, what is the choice, what is the outcome, right? And I put them in my pocket. And one thing that I say when you start a one-on-one, you should think about those 3 things before the one-on-one, and hopefully be able to share your story with the person. Tell them why you're there. Tell them why you're doing this work. One very important thing is to also get to know the person. Check in about how they're doing. There's nothing I hate more than when I sit down on a one-on-one and the person is like, let's cut to the chase. I'm like, hold on. Like, let's talk a little bit, okay? There we get sometimes to be very robotic when we are having one-on-ones, and we think it's like this is a formula, it's A, B, C. No, we have to make sure that we check in with the person. The other day, for example, I sat down on a one-on-one with a mother in Phoenix, and the first question I asked was, how are you doing today? She said, I'm not doing so well. I said, why? She said, this is the statement. She said, I lost my son to the system. And I said, what do you mean by that? She said, my son, at 14 years old, entered the juvenile justice system. He just came out at 24 after going in and going out of the system at 24, and he just got arrested again, and I think this time I'm not getting him back. That's the way we started the one-on-one. Imagine that. Imagine if I would have said, let me tell you what I want to talk about, right? That would have been a huge mistake on my part. So you had to genuinely care about the person. So I asked, tell me more about this, right? I learned that she was an amazing, amazing activist in the school of her son, and that her schools always pushed her away because she was a loud voice and advocacy for her son. I learned that she was disenchanted from organizations and community organizing because she's done it before and she was burned out. I learned that her son was still in detention and that she didn't have an attorney. So I was able to try to find an attorney to offer that help to her. That conversation reminded me again of getting to know the person. There are times that people ask me, what are the questions I should be asking? If I'm giving you a list of questions, then we're not having a real conversation. You're interviewing the person, right? It's very important to get to know the person genuinely. Be genuine. Listen actively. How many of you have had a person in front of you who's asking you questions and they can make eye contact because they're thinking about what they're going to ask you next, right? Or they're writing down everything that you're saying. I actually have always a notebook with me when I am having a one-on-one, but I only write the reminders, a word, a thing, but I don't write full sentences. The reason is because I need to be listening to the person. And one thing that I have a hard time is writing and listening, on my case, right? So if you are great at that, you should do it. But one of the things that I always say is you have to actively listen. What I mean is listen to the person fully. And then don't be thinking about the next question. That next question will arrive in the next one. Also, facilitate the conversation. I am coaching an organizer right now who every time she has a one-on-one with someone, she walks away organized. What I mean by that is the other person organizes her. So they sit down and the other person might say, oh, I work in a campaign. She's like, oh, really? And what is that campaign? And then she's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to volunteer with you tonight. So I'm always like, yeah, but we're working together to create a movement. It's great for you to volunteer and support each other. That's great. But you have to facilitate a conversation. Have some level of structure, which I'm going to provide today as well in a way of a worksheet. But facilitate the conversation. So try to get to the different elements of the conversation. So connect your story, get to know the person, and be genuine. We're actually going to start with a video, a little piece that it's about a minute and something in this first part that the Resistance School shot, and I'm really, really happy about that. So we're going to watch it, and then we're going to debrief it. So please catch, did the person build a relationship? Did the person, was the person genuine? Was the person actually present and actively listening?
Hi. In this video, you'll see me doing a one-on-one conversation with Jeff, a potential new recruit. Pay attention to who's doing most of the talking, how I ask questions to draw out our shared values, and how I make sure to get a commitment from him so he can become more actively involved. Hi.
Hi, I'm Jeff.
Anjali, so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Did you find the coffee shop okay?
Yeah, thank you for the directions.
I'm so glad that Sarah connected us.
Yeah, me too.
You're not from Boston originally.
No, I'm not. I'm from Rockland, New York. It's the suburbs outside the city, and I came to Boston a few years ago for school.
Oh, okay. What's Rockland like?
It's really boring. There's a lot of shopping malls and parking lots, basically.
My hometown is actually Shelton, Connecticut, and sounds very similar. We have the only wiffle ball factory in the world, so it's like our one claim to fame. I'd really like to get to know you.
So one thing we're going to do is we're going to pause it there because that is kind of like the relationship building piece, right? Now, she did it in 1 minute and 2 seconds, right? We hopefully spend more time during that part, right? But what did you notice that she did in the beginning of the conversation? What was she trying to do? Yes? Can someone, who would say? Who can tell me what you were looking at? What were you observing? Yes, let's try to get a mic to you. And what do you think was happening in the conversation in the beginning?
I think she checked in with him. Like, how did you found the coffee?
Yeah. How do you find the coffee shop, right? One really cool thing is that she was ready there. I always try to be early for one-on-ones, right? Because I always try for the person to see me when I get it there. And I usually prepare before, right? So the first thing she said is, how do you find the coffee shop, right? And what did he say? What did he answer? Thank you for the directions, right? That is the best thing because she actually confirmed with him and said, this is how you get to the place. That is beautiful practice. Great. Anyone else that you observed something that she did really well when started establishing a relationship? Anybody observe anything that she did really well? Yes. We're going to get the mic to you over here. What did she do really well?
I think she showed that they have a common ground, that they're from the same environment, very similar. And that's what built connection between them.
That's right. Like there was some levity in the conversation, right? Like there wasn't kind of like a boring conversation. It was really easy. It was like, all right, so where were you from? Here's where I'm from, right? One thing that I usually do is I always ask people, how long have you been living here? And I learn a lot from the neighborhood or the place where they're from, okay? So that is one thing that I usually say is this is a really quick, important time.